Right, we're going to remove the mixer channels from our 244 for cleaning or repair or to swap them round. This is a Tascam 244 with the front case off and the transport removed from it. In case you're looking at this and thinking, what the fuck is that? It's a Tascam 244, it really is. If you're wondering, do I need to have removed this or the plastic case in order to get at the mixer channels? The answer is no. I mean, you need to remove the back case. This guy, you know, that would be sitting that way on top of there. I've already done a video on how to remove that. Check my channel if you haven't already seen it. But to get these 4 channel strips, it doesn't matter whether that's on. It doesn't really matter whether the front case is on or not. Also, you could see earlier that the plastic knobs have been removed from these mixer channels. You don't have to do that. The only ones you will need to remove are these fader sliders. They just pull off. But you know, the blue, yellow, green, red ones, you can see the gaps in the metal chassis are easily wide enough to allow for those to come through. Some of the little white knobs on some of these horizontal switches, they might get stuck in the thin cavity on the plastic case as it comes off. So, you know, watch out for that you don't lose them. But you don't need to take those off either. Once those 1, 2, 3 screws are removed, then you just lift it out from the back. So other than the back case, the only bit that's like really necessary to remove in order to get at these mixer strips is this DBX board here. The way that's attached, actually one of these seems to be removed already, but there's 1, 2 screws here. And then that slides back slightly. You can see there's 2 metal tabs here that act as a kind of hinge. And then that comes off like so. Now, depending what you're doing, I think it's okay to just leave that. You know, I've got the edge of a desk here, I'll just leave that dangling off. If you wanted to remove this completely, then you've got a power cable here. You can do this by wedging a flathead screwdriver in there to pry these apart if you're worried you might break something. But I mean, I'm kind of got a sense of how strong these are, so I just pull them out like that, and so you could take it off completely, just let those wires dangle. So you can see that there are 4 strips here. They're completely modular, they're identical to each other. Say you had 2 machines, right, and you had a problem with channel 3 in one of them, you could hoik out just that channel and take one that you knew worked from your other machine and put it in, and it should work. And that modularity is one of the things that makes this unit nice to work on, so long as you've got mixer problems. By comparison, the record and playback boards, these ones, there's a whole rat's nest of wires you need to remove to get that out. And then there's a certain amount, even once you've lifted that out, there's a certain amount of disassembly to get at the circuit boards themselves. So in that way, this model is harder to work on than later models where essentially everything that this is doing is laid out as one big flat printed circuit board. But mixer issues, really easy to work on this one. Channel 1 and 2 are kind of harder to take out because of the position of these headphone sockets. One of the 2 metal posts that the DBX board was mounted on, you need to kind of remove that and undo these screws and loosen that a bit in order to get channel 1 out. Channel 2 is not too bad, but channel 1 can be a pain in the arse to remove. It's somewhat easier to do with the plastic case removed, but it can be done with the front plastic case still on there. So, in terms of unplugging things, this red and white cable here, that goes directly to the master fader. So we lift that out here. Again, you can use pliers, pry at that socket a little bit with a flathead screwdriver if you're feeling cautious. With that out of the way, these orange and black, unplug these. If memory serves, I think that's the LED power, positive and negative for the 5V for the LED. I would need to check the schematic and the service manual to be sure. And then they're daisy chained along here. By the way, it's completely normal to have a loose one. That's to do with the modularity of this. There isn't a 0th channel for that cable to go to. When you're reassembling, you're like, oh, hang on, where the fuck does that go? It's just going to sit loose in there, that's fine. And then each of these is going to have 2 sockets. One going into the mixer board and one coming from the mixer board into this board, which is its playback amplifier, but it's also got a lot of stuff for the power supply, a lot of the capacitors which filter the AC to make it into DC that's usable by other parts of the circuit. That's an aside, but basically there's 1, 2 plugs per channel, so that's for channel 4. Do the same thing for channel 3, and for channel 2, and for channel 1. And each of these are going to have 3 screws, so 1, 2, 3. So it can be a bit of a fight to get out, but it's just wires being twisted around each other. Just give it a shiggle, they'll come loose. Same idea here, got 1, 2, 3 screws. This white cable here, by the way, is how the headphone sockets get to the record playback monitor boards here. This one, channel 2, we should be able to remove without too much problem. This is the one that I mentioned is going to be a bit of a problem. Basically, it's not going to come out very easily without those headphone sockets being out of the way, because the back of the fader strip here is going to bash into that. So you need to remove these 2 screws here. They're all of the same type, by the way. They're the same kind that attach the transport to the chassis. So we need to remove those and get that out, but then really we need to get this post for the DBX board out of the way. So I'll unscrew that first. So you can see there's a little hinge guy that goes into a kind of square hole in the chassis there. And there's only one way it can go back. Then we're going to remove these screws. Basically, you're going to remove these headphones and that at the same time. That's going to sit there at this 45-degree angle, like that, and that'll create enough clearance that when we unscrew this mixer channel, we can lift this end up and pull it out that way. What I'm noticing as I'm unscrewing these is that there's quite a lot of sort of sticky residue underneath. If at some point someone's kind of poured a drink on this, then it would accumulate here. It's not necessarily the end of the world. Or in fact, that might be oil, like somebody in their incredible intelligence and foresight has maybe sprayed oil in there. Oof. I mean, this is a machine that I've done limited electrical testing on it because it was really dirty. So I don't see the point in doing a preliminary electric test on it until I've given these mixer modules a deep clean. That was a reluctant screw. It sounded a bit rapey. Oof. Yeah, I just went there. Right, so you see how I'm pulling that forward. Yeah, there's all sorts of manky goo in the front of that. So that's how that's removed. I don't think it's worth doing a separate video on how to reassemble this, but one tip I will give you, and this applies whether you are doing this with the front plastic case off or on. You could use wooden blocks, but just for the sake of not scratching anything, what I do is get a couple of bits of rolled up cardboard and put an elastic band around it, and that gives you a couple of wedges that are approximately, what, 1.5 inches in height. So I'll stick one at that end and one at that end. What that does is it gives you about 1.5 inches of clearance the other side of that chassis, so that when you put those back in, the metal face on the mixer module is flush with the chassis, and that makes it easier to screw back in. That's all we're doing in this video. In the next one, I'll show you how to go about cleaning these. It's actually a very similar process to one that I showed in a previous video where I was cleaning the mixer on a Tascam 424 Mark III. You may as well see it as it applies to this kind of a mixer channel.